Hi everybody, welcome to another video re the motorcycle tank that I've got that I'm doing up. So the first one in the series I did was just removing or as best you could removing the dents. I'm trying to do this with what I would call basic tools, so it's things that most people would probably have, and the idea of it is that, you know, often when you see videos on YouTube, people do things and they do things really well, there's no doubt about that, but they've got a lot of equipment which is not necessarily within the reach of a lot of people. So I'm trying to bear in mind, you know, the fact that people haven't got loads of stuff and that the you know, the equipment can be expensive, so I'm trying to do it with relatively cheap stuff. So anyway, what I'm doing at the moment is I'm just taking the decals off, because this video is going to be about removing the decals and then removing the paint, stripping the paint with some paint stripper. And you'll find that if you try and put paint stripper on top of decals, it doesn't work. It will take, if there's lacquer over the top of the decals, which most of them will have. What I'm pulling off now is actually some kind of tank protector I think somebody's put on there. I don't think that's something that Yamaha originally put on there. It's just to stop the seat rubbing the tank. But with decals, normally there's some lacquer over the top, although I must admit with this there was lacquer over the top. You could see it because some of it had started to peel, where presumably it got, you know, the sun had affected it or whatever, but it was very thin. But that's what they do at the factory. The layer of primer, paint and lacquer is altogether is so thin, because I guess it's all they need to give it protection and to give it a good finish. So why put on more than you need to? If you're doing it as your own job, you would probably put more on. Certainly I'd put more on, but you know, that's just because you're doing it as a hobby or an interest rather than trying to make money out of it, I guess. So you'll see sometimes when I turn the tank over, you'll see underneath that it's actually quite rusty underneath. It's a 2008 or 2009 bike, so it's old, but it's not that old, so you would expect better really, but it's just the way they do it. They literally put a bit of primer and a little bit of base coat, and they don't seem to bother putting any lacquer underneath as well. Having said that, I've seen people refurbish tanks on YouTube, not lots I must admit, but I have seen people, and they don't even bother with the underneath of the tank. They just do the top of the tank because they're doing it as a project to sell the bike, and I can't do that because, you know, underneath, A, it's probably a different colour, and B, it's a bit rusty and all that. So, you know, without going stupidly over the top, I do like to make sure things are reasonably okay. So you see the decals are coming off here quite well, and you'll see how easy they come off, which means that there isn't much lacquer over the top. So a bit of heat and off the decals come. Now this video, if you think I'm working really fast, then that's me. I'm just superhuman. But in reality, all this whole video, except me narrating it afterwards, is at 2 times speed. So it is double the speed that it actually is being done at. And you'll later on, particularly with the stripping part, you'll see that you'll probably gather that I've cut some out, probably in reality about 15 minutes of real-time footage out, because it just goes on too long. But I wanted to leave most of it in because, you know, not most people watch the videos all the way through, but some people do watch all the videos all the way through. So, you know, some of the stuff can be quite interesting for people to see, and I guess those that don't want to see it can just skip through it. So you'll see the decals are off now, but they left a real gummy mess behind. So I'm using paint thinners to remove the gum, the glue off the various parts of the tank. So I showed you a little bit of that, but most of that I've cut out. So now we're going on to the paint stripping, and the first thing I must say is be really careful with paint strippers. You get varying qualities and varying strength. This one is actually a really strong one, so you need to be really careful. You need to have really good ventilation where you're doing. Here I've actually got 3 fans on to take the fumes away. I've got a mask with PP3 and gas filters on it, charcoal gas filters on it, so the actual effect of the fumes I didn't have any at all. But you do need to be really careful. Now you should also have your arms covered, really, but it was 24 degrees or 25 degrees today, and I really didn't want my arms covered. I'm also really tall. I'm a big bloke. I'm 6'6", so I can't find a painting overall that actually fits me and covers up my sleeves. As soon as I put my arms forward, the sleeves roll up. So I figured, well, I'd just take care and avoid contact with me skin as much as possible. So you'll see here that I'm putting some lines across with a screwdriver, and that just it cuts into the lacquer and the paintwork, and that just allows the various chemicals in the paint stripper to get in quicker. So it allows it to work quicker, is the idea of it. And you can actually see it start bubbling up as you do it. You'll see it's going white, and that's the stripper is actually clear. It's like a clear gel, but you'll see that the parts where it's going white are initially the lacquer, the top lacquer bubbling up. So the lacquer bubbles up, and then eventually the paint underneath will bubble up. Now it's inevitable when you do this that you're going to get some bits where the paint, for some reason or other, you just haven't put enough on, or whatever, just doesn't want to come off. So you need to persevere with that. So the idea is that you do the whole tank, and then you may have to add a bit here and there to remove a bit more that's stubbornly left behind. I didn't want to clean the tank off with water. It makes a mess with all the old paint coming off, and my missus would probably have a go at me about that. And B, I didn't want to get the inside of the tank wet, because it's actually really good inside the tank. So, if I can possibly avoid it, I will try not to get the inside or the outside of the tank wet, just so that I don't get more rust to deal with. Because obviously once you've got this paint off, it's bare metal, and any moisture that the steel will oxidize or rust. So you do need to be careful of that. So again, I'm just making lines in it just to help the penetration of the stripper. Having said that, you'll see that certain parts of it, the paint is coming off. You can see the paint starting to come off, so it's gonna work well. But you do have to be careful when you do the. I'm using a screwdriver to do lines across it to help the paint come off. You do have to be careful not to mark the steel. If you're doing something that you want the steel underneath to be usable and good, obviously you don't want to be scraping really hard, because you can put marks in the steel. And although this is actually the steel is relatively thick, so if you did do that, you could sand it out if you wanted to. You just have to be careful of whatever you're doing. This is obviously a tank, but you might be doing something else that you don't want scratches underneath. So you have to be really careful just to scratch it enough to get through the lacquer, so that the stripper can penetrate into the base coat, but you're not marking the material underneath. Now at this point you see me taking the gloves off, because the stripper is actually going through the gloves. The gloves are intact, but the stripper is actually, you can feel your hands just burning slightly. So as I say, you do have to be really careful. And in fact, I put these black nitrile gloves on, which are better, but I ended up putting 2 pairs, a pair of blue with a pair of black over the top. I don't think I've got the part where I changed over again. As I say, I've chopped quite a bit out to speed it up. But as I say, you do have to be really careful, and it's even penetrating the gloves. When I looked afterwards, my skin was actually fine, but you can just feel it on top, just burning slightly. And as I say, it hadn't actually penetrated the glove, so it's really weird, but you just have to be so careful with this stuff. So read the technical data sheet of it so that you're aware of all the various protection you need for yourself and your respiratory system as well. So it can't be emphasized enough really how dodgy this stuff is. And of course, if you don't want to do this, the alternative is sanding. Now that's normally how I work. I sand things down and leave the old paint on, because you can do that. And if you don't want to go through the process of stripping, but I just thought for the project I would do a complete strip so that we're down to the bare metal. And obviously we've got the dents to get rid of, so it is better to have the you can see I left that there for about 15 minutes, so the wrapping up, this is 15 minutes afterwards, and you can see how most of it is coming off quite easily. It's quite a messy process because it's slightly sticky, although most of it is relatively dry, but as I said before, it's inevitable that you'll get some parts that adhere better than others. So there are some parts you're going to have to go over again with the stripper. But you know, I suppose the whole project from start to finish, and I've put some photos at the end of the finished thing, not the finished tank, you know, just ready for the bare tank basically, without anything on it. So the next video we'll do some filling. There's a dent at the top. You can see 4 or 5 dent marks where we've prized it out. As far as I can tell with my finger, they are below, or where I think below the other side, which is ideal, because I tapped them down slightly because I thought they were slightly proud. So now they're a bit below, so we just have to do a skim of filler over the top, over the top, and sand that down. And again, the crease at the bottom is all but out, but there is a little bit of filling that's going to have to be done there. And at the top it seems okay. When I say the top, it's the top and bottom of the side. If you saw the first video, you'd see getting the dents out, you'd see where they are, but it's yeah, it looks like it's gonna be fine. But I wanted it down to bare metal so that I could do that properly, and then we can get the repair, the painting underway. Once we've got the filling done and the sanding done, we can get the primer on and go from there. And as I said in the first video, if you've watched it, if you haven't, then I'll take the opportunity to say it again. I'm a little bit unsure as to what the best way to proceed with this is, whether to do it with, you know, a cheap spray gun from start to finish, so something like the GF3, which is a cheap little gun, and use that for primer as well, because it's not ideal to spray primer. You know, normally you would spray a high build primer, especially if you've done some repairs. You spray a high build primer, and be able to you know, sand that down afterwards. And because it's high build, you'd use normally say a 1.8 tip or 1.9 tip, something like that. But obviously the GF3 being a minigun is ample size for this tank, but it only comes a maximum of 1.2 tip. So all I'd have to do is thin out the primer, so it'd just mean more coats of primer. You see just there the video jumped, so this is about another 10 minutes on, and you can see we've still got the underneath of the tank to do, which I started doing a little bit there, and just some of the bits that were hanging on. But I've spared you the pain of the underneath of the tank, because the underneath of the tank, because there was a rust, I got most of the paint off, and then I sanded down, and I've got virtually all the rust off. And as I say, there's some pictures at the end to show you how far we've got and what it actually looks like. But going back to keeping it as a cheap project, I thought maybe I'd try and do it with a GF3 all the way through. So it's a £28, so $38 US dollars spray gun, which for you guys in Australia, if you're watching, is about $48, something like that. Spray gun. So it's a cheap spray gun, and I'll just see if I can use it for all the processes and see how we get along with that, because I think it will I think it will be all right. I've sprayed primer before with a like a 1.2, one R150 it was, 1.2 mini gun, and as long as you've thinned the primer out enough, it will spray it. It's not ideal, and I wouldn't claim it's ideal, but it is, you know, something that you can do, and maybe that's the idea of this project, to make it as cheap as possible and see what kind of a finish we get with a relatively cheap project, and that might get more people watching it, because it sorry, need a drink, hang on, sorry, it relates more to what they can do. That's the problem with narrating something, your voice tends to go. So yeah, as I say, that's the idea of it. Maybe do a cheap project or whatever, and see how we go. So it's coming towards the end of the video. You'll be very pleased to know, listening to me rambling on and losing my voice. Yeah, and as I say, the next video will be the priming and filling, or should I say filling and priming. So I hope you've learnt something. As I say, do be careful with this stuff, because the way you'll see me now, I've actually got 2 pairs of gloves on underneath, and that seemed to do the trick. Okay, but you do have to be really careful and read the technical data sheet. So we're almost there now. I've just got the last bits to do, and you'll see effectively the paper at the bottom, the plastic wrapping, that is a good way of insulating the tank. So you put the paint stripper on, and then you roll it over the top, and that helps it eat into the paint, because obviously if you leave it open, A, you get more fumes, but B, the effectiveness of the paint stripper tends to get diminished a bit, because it evaporates quicker. Anyway, so I hope you enjoyed it. You can see my fingers are still hurting a bit, so we can just wrap all that up and throw it in the bin, because it's not flammable. Make sure to dispose of it correctly though. And here's the finished tank. So this is about 2 hours after we started. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks very much for watching. Cheers. Bye bye.